If you were born between 1976 and 1985, your brain was shaped differently than almost any other generation in history. Not because of your personality, not because of your choices, but because of the exact psychological window you grew up in. And once you understand what happened during that window, a lot of things about yourself will suddenly make sense. You know that feeling when you don't quite belong to the moment you're in, but you also don't fully belong to what came before it? It shows up in small ways. The way you can remember life before everything went digital, but now you live inside it anyway. The way you're comfortable with independence, but still carry this quiet instinct to handle things on your own even when you don't have to. The way you adapt, but never completely settle. Most people around you don't notice this tension. They just call it being reserved or overthinking or being stuck between worlds. But from the inside, it never feels like any of those things. From the inside, it feels like you learned how to move through change before anyone explained what was changing. Now picture this clearly. It's late afternoon in the late 90s or early 2000s. The sun is slowly dropping. Everything feels slower than today. You just got home. You throw your bag somewhere in the room. No notifications, no messages waiting, no scrolling. Nothing is calling your attention because nothing is waiting for you to check it. Within minutes, you're outside, not because you planned it, but because everyone else already is. A bike leans against a wall, dusty streets, kids shouting from somewhere you can't see, someone arguing about a game that doesn't even matter tomorrow. No one is recording it, no one's posting it. It just exists and disappears into memory. That was normal. You're maybe 14 or 15. One afternoon, everything is the same as it's always been. School, friends, outside, plans made by showing up. And then slowly, quietly, everything starts accelerating. A computer in a classroom, a phone that can only call, then text messages. Then suddenly, everything is online. But nobody announces it. It just replaces things. No warning, no map, no explanation. You just watch the ground shift and you figure out how to walk on it anyway. That moment, that was the beginning of your wiring. Psychologists who study generational development talk about something called transitional cohorts. People who grew up not before a major societal shift and not after it, but directly inside one. And what that does to the developing brain is subtle, but it lasts a lifetime. You didn't grow up in a stable world. You grew up in a world that was actively changing shape underneath you while you were still forming your core understanding of how life works. Old enough to remember the slower analog world, young enough to be pulled into a rapidly accelerating digital one. You didn't fully belong to either, and your brain adopted accordingly. Here's what developmental research shows about people who grow up in rapidly shifting environments. They develop higher contextual awareness, more sensitive to tone, behavior, and subtle change than people raised in stable systems. But they also carry something else. Researchers who studied transitional cohorts found a pattern they called low-grade uncertainty, a persistent background sense that things could shift again, even in stable moments. Not clinical anxiety, just a quiet readiness, and that makes complete sense, because your brain wasn't trained on stability. It was trained on change. So even when things are fine, part of you doesn't fully relax into that. Not because something's wrong, but because historically, fine didn't always stay fine. And this shows up in very specific ways. You double-check things others would just trust. You think one step ahead without realizing you're doing it. You stay mentally prepared, even when nothing is happening. Not tense, just ready. Anxiety reacts to perceived threat. What you have is different: watchfulness, an anticipation of uncertainty that developed because your environment required it. If you've ever felt like you're always just a little more mentally on than the people around you, That's not your imagination. That's conditioning. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Being the one who adapts, the one who figures it out, who handles it, who doesn't make a fuss, that's not just a strength. It's also how you became the person everyone relies on, while quietly running on empty. The world rewarded your adaptability, so you kept adapting. But at some point, adaptability stopped being a response to the situation and became a substitute for knowing what you actually need. And most people in this group have never fully stopped to notice that, because flexibility over time can quietly become self-silencing. You don't lose your voice. You just delay it again and again until it becomes genuinely hard to tell the difference between what you truly want and what you've simply learned to accept. That's the quiet trade-off no one names. There's also a contradiction living inside you. You were raised close enough to traditional values that independence felt mandatory. Asking for help didn't always come naturally. But then you moved into a world that suddenly valued openness, vulnerability, constant connection. So now part of you handles things alone automatically. Another part knows you don't have to. And those two parts don't always agree. What looks like being capable from the outside often feels like being responsible for everything on the inside. That's a very different experience. And here's a paradox that might surprise you. The very thing that makes you resilient, your ability to navigate change, can make it harder to feel settled. Because when you've spent years adapting, stillness starts to feel unfamiliar. Not uncomfortable, just incomplete. Like you're waiting for something to shift again, even when nothing is. If you've ever questioned why you can handle chaos but struggle with calm, why you adjust quickly but hesitate to fully relax, it's not a flaw, it's learned. Your brain wasn't shaped in a static environment, it was shaped in motion, so of course it keeps moving. But here's what I want you to take from this. This way of being gives you something most people don't have. You understand contrast. You've seen different versions of how the world works. You don't just live in the present, you compare it, measure it, feel how it's shifting beneath the surface. That awareness, even when it feels heavy, is a form of intelligence. The kind that isn't loud, the kind that doesn't always get recognized, but the kind that sees things before others do. So if there's ever been a part of you that felt slightly out of sync, like you're always adjusting to a world that never quite settles, it's not because you're behind, and it's not because you're broken. It's because you learned to move with change before most people even realized it was happening. Instead of asking, why am I like this? You can start asking something different. What did I have to become to keep up with everything that changed? That question doesn't just explain you, it respects you. Because the truth is, you didn't just grow up. You were forged in a transition that most people never had to consciously survive. And you came out the other side still moving, still watching, still carrying something forward that you haven't fully named yet. Maybe you're just starting to. If this felt true, drop a comment and tell me which line stopped you. I read everyone.